When we talk about Hitler, we automatically think of pure evil. Even the devil is tolerated in our modern culture, while Hitler is a definition of evil. The whole world was terrified of what he was capable of doing if Nazi Germany wasn't put to an end. However, there's one man who scared even Hitler to the point of giving him nightmares. This man was Rudolf Steiner. So, who exactly was Rudolf Steiner, and why did Hitler feel threatened by him? How did an Austrian mystic's universalism challenge the Nazi Party's nationalism in an epic battle of ideologies? In an article signed by Adolf Hitler, he warns against Rudolf Steiner, the founder of Anthroposophy, saying that he's destroying the people's normal state of mind. The article was published on March the 15th, 1921 in the National Socialist newspaper. This was years before Hitler became the Führer. In this video, let's explore the philosophy and achievements of Rudolf Steiner and how he was threatening the Nazis to the point of giving Hitler nightmares. Let's find out. Rudolf Steiner was a revolutionary thinker who left an enduring mark on Europe in the early 20th century. Born in 1861 in the Austrian Empire, Steiner displayed an insatiable intellectual curiosity from a young age, immersing himself in philosophy, the natural sciences, and a wide array of esoteric spiritual traditions. After establishing himself as a respected scholar and editor of Goethe's scientific writings, Steiner began to delve deeper into occult and esoteric knowledge, joining various Rosicrucian and Theosophical groups. It was through these mystical explorations that the foundations of his unique philosophical and spiritual worldview, which he called Anthroposophy, began to take shape. Rudolf Steiner's philosophical and spiritual journey was deeply shaped by his early experiences with the Theosophical movement and his interactions with its most prominent figure, Helena Blavatsky. As a young man, Steiner was drawn to the esoteric teachings and cosmological perspectives of Theosophy, which sought to synthesize wisdom from Eastern and Western mystical traditions. He became an active member of the Theosophical Society, eventually rising to the position of General Secretary of the German section in 1902. It was during this time that Steiner crossed paths with Helena Blavatsky, the Russian occultist who had founded the Theosophical Society in the late 19th century. Though Steiner was initially captivated by Blavatsky's expansive vision and her insights into the hidden realms of the spiritual world, he soon began to diverge from her teachings, finding them to be too heavily influenced by Eastern philosophies and lacking in a distinctly Western Christian perspective. Steiner's growing discomfort with certain theosophical doctrines, coupled with his desire to develop his own unique spiritual philosophy, led him to break away from the movement in 1912. He went on to establish the Anthroposophical Society, which drew upon his deep study of esoteric Christianity, Goethe's scientific worldview, and his own clairvoyant experiences. Despite this separation, Steiner's early immersion in Theosophy left an indelible mark on his thinking and the foundational concepts of Anthroposophy. Elements of Theosophical cosmology, such as the idea of evolving spiritual hierarchies and the notion of reincarnation, can be found woven throughout Steiner's written works and lectures. Over the course of his lifetime, Steiner authored over 30 books and delivered thousands of lectures, covering a vast range of subjects from education and agriculture to medicine and the esoteric sciences. Among Steiner's most influential and enduring concepts was his idea of the threefold human being. This framework, which he explored in depth in seminal works like Theosophy and the Philosophy of Freedom, formed the foundation of his holistic approach to understanding the human condition and its relationship to the cosmic forces of the universe. Other key anthroposophical concepts developed by Steiner include biodynamic agriculture, anthroposophical medicine, and his insights into the nature of human evolution and the spiritual world. These ideas, expressed through his prodigious written and spoken output, have continued to resonate with seekers of spiritual truth and a more holistic understanding of the human experience. At the core of anthroposophy was the belief that individual human spiritual development held the key to transforming society and the world. Steiner rejected the rigid materialist worldview that dominated much of Western thought, instead proposing a holistic, spiritually infused understanding of the cosmos and the human being's place within it. Steiner's ideas quickly gained considerable traction as he applied his anthroposophical principles to groundbreaking achievements in fields ranging from education to the arts. In 1919, he founded the first Waldorf school, which blended rigorous academics with a strong emphasis on creativity, imagination, and holistic learning. The Waldorf approach quickly spread across Europe, as parents and educators recognized its capacity to nurture well-rounded, free-thinking students. But Steiner's ambitions went far beyond educational reform. He envisioned a complete overhaul of society, with autonomously governed cultural, political, and economic spheres, a vision he termed the threefold social order. That's when Hitler was quoted in an article published in the Völkische Beobachter newspaper, saying, "The Gnostic, anthroposophist Rudolf Steiner himself, the adherent of the threefold social order, which is one of the many completely Jewish methods of destroying the people's normal state of mind." In 1921, Rudolf Steiner's proposal to reform social and political life in Central Europe was gaining widespread attention. Not all such attention was positive, because the Nazis had a different vision for reforming the social order of the region. We all know how that story goes. Millions of Jews are murdered in the Holocaust. Entire populations are exterminated in concentration camps. Civil liberties vanish, and a world war brings unimaginable suffering and death. With the Nazis steadily consolidating power, the future of Steiner's life's work hung in the balance. But that didn't stop him from haunting the Nazis, which eventually were met with their demise by the end of World War II. But how did the Nazis rise to the degree of power they've had, especially since they started with an esoteric group similar to anthroposophists? As the 1920s came to a close, the Nazi Party was rapidly gaining strength in Germany. And this posed a grave threat to Rudolf Steiner's anthroposophical movement. At the heart of the Nazis' rise was a secretive occult group called the Thula Society. The Thula Gesellschaft, or Thula Society, was founded in 1918 by a wealthy aristocrat named Rudolf von Sebottendorf. This group was obsessed with extreme German nationalism, hatred of Jewish people, and mystical occult beliefs. They saw themselves as an elite group that would restore Germany to greatness through racial purity. One of the group's central obsessions was the swastika symbol. The Thule members believed the swastika held ancient mystical power and represented Aryan supremacy. They adopted it as the Nazi Party's logo, imbuing it with their twisted, anti-Semitic ideology. In 1919, a young corporal named Adolf Hitler attended his first Thula Society meeting, where he was immediately attracted to the group's virulent anti-Semitism and grandiose vision of German racial dominance. This could not have been more different from Rudolf Steiner's anthroposophy. While the Thula Society reveled in ideas of racial superiority and the suppression of the individual, anthroposophy celebrated the freedom and spiritual development of every human being. Steiners philosophy stood firmly against the Nazis' cruel collectivist ideology. As the Nazis consolidated their power in the 1930s, the Thule Society's influence faded. But their dangerous ideas lived on as the Nazis incorporated the group's occult symbols, anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, and racist beliefs into the Nazi regime. The rise of the Nazis was a dark, terrifying chapter in German history. one where the Thula Society's occult musings led to horrific real-world consequences. And as Rudolf Steiner's Anthroposophical movement would soon discover, their humane vision was now in stark opposition to the nightmarish realities of this new fascist order. However, even with such power on the material plane, Hitler and the Nazis were still haunted by anthroposophy from other planes, namely the astral plane, which is an invisible matrix of causality that creates ripple effects on the material plane. Rudolf Steiner once said, "Knowledge of life in the astral world leads us to a conclusion of fundamental importance, namely that the physical world is the product of the astral world." Dietrich Eckart, a mentor to Adolf Hitler, had warned the Führer about the dangers posed by Rudolf Steiner and the Grail initiates that he led. Eckart claimed that this group had discovered the satanic nature of the Thula group and watched over all their meetings and initiation rituals from the astral plane. This notion of Steiner and his anthroposophists observing the occult workings of the Thula Society from the astral plane speaks to the profound spiritual and esoteric forces that were believed to be at play. The source material, which is The Morning of the Magicians by Louis Pauwels and Jacques Bergier, published in 1960, speculates on how the Thula Society was associated with Vril Society, which was in turn loosely associated with the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, a group devoted to the study of the occult and the metaphysical. The Vril Society believed the supermen will arrive from deep inside the hollow earth. Their devotion to the Vril, which is a secret form of energy, originated from an 1871 novel by Edward Bulwer Lytton, Vril, The Power of the Coming Race. Some theosophists, notably Helena Blavatsky, William Scott Elliott, and Rudolf Steiner, accepted the book as being at least in part based on occult truth. Someday the unknown supermen would openly arrive and take command. It was within this charged, mystical environment that Hitler claimed to have encountered the Supermen, an encounter that left him shaken and afraid. Who were these Supermen? Why did they show themselves to Hitler? Interestingly, the source material suggests that these Supermen may have been more than just figments of Hitler's imagination. It notes that the founder of the Hermetic Order, Samuel Liddell MacGregor Mathers, had previously made contact with the unknown supermen. Besides Mathers, Adolf Hitler had also been in the presence of the supermen. He told Hermann Rauschning, the governor of Danzig, "The new man is living amongst us now. He is here." Hitler then confided to Rauschning, "I will tell you a secret. I have seen the new man. He is intrepid and cruel. I was afraid of him." The Morning of the Magicians might be a speculative history book, but that doesn't diminish the intriguing connections it draws between secret societies, esoteric traditions, and the shaping of historical events. However, it's possible that the Superman who so unsettled Hitler in the dead of night was not some mystical, otherworldly being, but rather the very real spiritual and intellectual force embodied by the clairvoyant Rudolf Steiner. While political forces are at play on the physical plane, spiritual forces from the astral plane are acting as the causal forces behind them. Rudolf Steiner clearly held a powerful presence in the Nazi leader's mind, enough to make the Führer feel threatened. Could it be that the supermen that so unsettled Hitler were in fact representatives of the Anthroposophical movement, observing the Nazis' sinister activities from the astral plane, as Eckart had warned? The text description of these beings as intrepid and cruel certainly aligns with the Nazis' perception of Steiner and his followers as dangerous adversaries. What do you think? Let us know in the comment section. Meanwhile, Steiner's humanistic philosophy of anthroposophy was fundamentally at odds with the racist, nationalist ideology of the Nazis. Anthroposophy celebrated the autonomy of the individual, the unity of humanity, and a holistic, spiritually infused worldview, qualities that the Nazi regime saw as dangerously un-German and subversive. In fact, the Nazis actively persecuted anthroposophists, viewing them as internationalists, pacifists, and even having ties to Jews. All charges that Steiner himself vehemently rejected. The Nazis banned anthroposophical publications, shuttered Waldorf schools, and even arrested prominent anthroposophists, sending some to concentration camps. Faced with this relentless assault, anthroposophists adopted a strategy of passive resistance, quietly continuing their work where possible, while making limited compromises in order to be tolerated by the authorities. It was an agonizing balance as they struggled to preserve Steiner's vision in the face of an increasingly repressive regime. Ironically, the Nazis saw anthroposophy as a direct threat precisely because of its humanistic, individualistic principles, values that were antithetical to the Nazis' collectivist racial ideology. As one Nazi official stated, "If one is to accept the totality of thinking embraced in a worldview and recognize its impact on the entire opinions and bearing of the people, then there can be no doubt that followers of anthroposophy must necessarily become opponents of National Socialism." Steiner's death in 1925 robbed the anthroposophical movement of its visionary founder, leaving it to navigate the treacherous waters of the Nazi era without his guiding hand. The future of Steiner's life's work hung in the balance as the darkness of fascism descended over Central Europe. In November 1935, the Anthroposophical Society was officially prohibited in Germany, with the Nazis citing the movement's internationally oriented nature and its individualistic and human-oriented education as threats to the National Socialistic idea of Volk. This decision followed years of increasing persecution and pressure from the Nazi authorities. The Nazis had closely investigated anthroposophy, commissioning numerous reports to document its perceived opposition to their ideology. One such report, written by Professor J.W. Hauer of the University of Tübingen, bluntly stated that every undertaking and activity of anthroposophy necessarily arises out of the anthroposophical worldview, and that this worldview was directly opposed to National Socialism. Another prominent Nazi thinker, Alfred Baumler, delved even deeper into Steiner's philosophical writings. Baumler recognized that anthroposophy's emphasis on the spirit of man and its rejection of race as the essential determinant of individual capacity were fundamentally at odds with the Nazis' racial doctrines. He concluded that the objectives of pedagogical activity in anthroposophy can only be humanistic and not based on race or ethnic groups. Facing this relentless assault, the anthroposophists were forced to navigate a difficult path of compromise and passive resistance. While they never publicly rejected the Nazi regime, they sought to quietly preserve their schools, cultural institutions, and spiritual practices for as long as possible. Ultimately, the Nazis viewed anthroposophy as a dangerous, subversive force that threatened the very foundations of their totalitarian state. In March 1936, Waldorf schools were prohibited from taking on new students. By summer of 1941, all Waldorf schools in Germany had been forced to close their doors. Prominent anthroposophists were arrested, and the movement was driven underground. At the heart of Rudolf Steiner's Anthroposophical philosophy was a profound belief in the inherent dignity and potential of the human being. Steiner saw each individual as a multifaceted spiritual entity, shaped by a complex interplay of cosmic forces that he described as the threefold human being. According to Steiner, within every person resides a delicate balance between two primary spiritual impulses, the Luciferic and the Ahrimanic. The Luciferic force represented humanity's capacity for intellect, creativity, and individual expression. It was the impulse towards freedom, enlightenment, and the realization of our highest spiritual aspirations. On the other hand, the Ahrimanic impulse manifested as the tendency towards materialism, mechanization, and the subjugation of the individual to the collective. This force pulled humanity in the direction of conformity, rigidity, and the suppression of our most essential, unique qualities. Steiner believed that the true path to spiritual and social harmony lay in reconciling these two opposing forces within the human being. He saw education as the primary means of cultivating this balance, fostering the development of autonomous, free-thinking individuals capable of navigating the complex interplay of Luciferic and Ahrimanic influences. This emphasis on the primacy of the individual spirit stood in stark contrast to the Nazis' conception of the Volk, the racial collective that demanded unwavering loyalty and the erasure of individual identity. Whereas the Nazis sought to homogenize their citizens in service of a mythic German national destiny, Steiner's Anthroposophy championed the inherent worth and diversity of each human being, regardless of their ethnic or cultural background. Furthermore, Steiner's philosophy rejected the notion of racial hierarchies and the inherent superiority of any one group over another. He saw humanity as a tapestry of diverse spiritual and cultural expressions, all of which were essential to the overall well-being of the social organism. The Nazis' obsession with racial purity and the elimination of undesirable elements was anathema to Steiner's inclusive, universalist worldview. As the Third Reich tightened its grip on Germany, the anthroposophists found themselves increasingly targeted and persecuted by the Nazi regime. Yet, even in the face of such overwhelming oppression, Steiner's followers remained committed to the principles of individual freedom, spiritual development, and the harmonious coexistence of all peoples. As the dark shadows of the Nazi regime faded into history, Rudolf Steiner's Anthroposophical Philosophy began to find new life and relevance in the modern era. While the horrors of fascism remained seared into the collective psyche of the world, Steiner's humanistic vision for a more harmonious and spiritually attuned society continued to resonate with growing numbers of people. At the heart of this resurgence was Steiner's profound understanding of the human being as a multifaceted spiritual entity, shaped by the delicate interplay of Luciferic and Ahrimanic impulses. In an age increasingly dominated by the cold, mechanistic forces of materialism and technological advancement, Anthroposophy offered a refreshing alternative, one that emphasized the importance of individual autonomy, creative expression, and a holistic approach to education and social development. The Waldorf school movement, which had been brutally suppressed by the Nazis, began to experience a remarkable renaissance in the decades following the Second World War. Parents and educators drawn to Steiner's principles of child-centered learning, artistic integration, and respect for the unique spiritual journey of each student flocked to these institutions, which now spanned the globe. Similarly, anthroposophical initiatives in the realms of healthcare, agriculture, and the arts continued to gain traction as people sought out alternatives to the increasingly homogenized and mechanized systems that dominated the modern world. Biodynamic farming, for instance, which drew directly from Steiner's insights into the spiritual and rhythmic foundations of the natural world, experienced a surge in popularity as concerns over industrial agriculture and environmental degradation grew. Yet, the legacy of anthroposophy extended far beyond these practical applications. Steiner's philosophical treatises, with their rich tapestry of esoteric symbolism and profound insights into the human condition, found new generations of devoted readers and scholars. His ideas on the reconciliation of Luciferic and Ahrimanic forces and the cultivation of the autonomous, spiritually aware individual resonated powerfully in our era of increasing social fragmentation and the erosion of traditional values. In contrast, the specter of Nazism, while still present in the collective psyche of the world, had largely been relegated to the fringes of society. Occasional attempts by fringe groups to revive its toxic ideology were swiftly and decisively condemned, as the overwhelming majority of people recognized the profound moral atrocities of fascism. As the 21st century unfolded, anthroposophy continued to evolve and adapt, drawing inspiration from new scientific discoveries, technological advancements, and the ever-changing social and cultural landscape. Steiner's vision of a world reconciled, where the creative and materialistic impulses of humanity were balanced in service of the greater good, remained a guiding light for those seeking to cultivate a more just, equitable, and spiritually enriched society. Nowadays, Steiner's ideas are becoming more popular than ever as people look for new ways to address the challenges of our time. With growing concerns about the environment, social inequalities, and the limits of materialism, Steiner's approach to living is finding renewed interest. Among esoteric students, Steiner's psychic research remains a captivating subject. His work on spiritual science and the nature of consciousness continues to intrigue those interested in exploring the deeper aspects of human experience. Steiner's ideas about telepathy, precognition, and the soul offer a unique and sometimes challenging perspective. While some people find his research groundbreaking, those who seek to explore alternate states of consciousness and other planes of reality often turn to his work for guidance and inspiration. His theories and practices offer new ways to experience these hidden dimensions of existence, making them a valuable resource for those interested in delving deeper into the mysteries of the microcosm and macrocosm. In the end, the enduring legacy of Rudolf Steiner and his anthroposophical philosophy stood in stark contrast to the fleeting, destructive nature of the Nazi ideology. Where the Nazis sought to extinguish the unique spark of the human spirit, Steiner championed its boundless potential, offering a path towards a future where the dignity and diversity of all people were celebrated and upheld. Thank you for watching this video. Leave us a like if you found this video valuable.